In the wake of the storm, lawmakers are already preparing for the next one, saying they'll take steps to improve the response and recovery by holding utility companies to task, as other states have done. We are happy to have with us Representative Vicki Nardello and also House Speaker Chris Donovan to talk about this legislation. Tell me what it is and what you're modeling it after, and how it could help in response in future storms.
Legislation is modeled after what happened in Massachusetts, and what we're trying to do is actually set benchmarks that the utilities need to follow. If they don't follow the benchmarks, then they're subject to fines.
Why is that not? I mean, that seems like such a common sense. I mean, that happens in every business. I mean, why is that not already in place?
It's not already in place because we haven't had the depth of emergency situations, and I think at this point we saw that in Massachusetts these benchmarks actually developed after their 2008 storm, and they began a storm that precipitated them as well.
So what kind of benchmarks would be set, and what kind of fines are we talking about?
Well, I think the first thing is that, you know, the difference in response, Massachusetts and Connecticut, is tremendous. I was talking to Representative Nardello earlier. Massachusetts, as of Thursday night, was pretty much in service. We're still 30 to 40% out of service. So
what accounts for that discrepancy?
They have more crews. They have twice the number of crews out there doing the work. We don't have crews doing the work. That's a real problem.
But why is that? I thought that CL&P and Massachusetts Electric is not the same company?
They have WEMCO in Massachusetts, and that is the same company, yes. But again, how they assign their crews is different. I think part of the problem here is that we're going to need to look very carefully at staffing. We're going to need to look very carefully at the way they communicate with the towns. Mayor Glassman was just here and talked about that, and there are definite issues in that area. We're going to need to look at our tree trimming policies, and we're going to need to look at how we put in accountability. What are the sanctions that are going to be in place?
Right now, Massachusetts, if I'm a company, I know in Massachusetts, if I don't get the job done, there will be fines. In Connecticut, there aren't fines. So if I'm a company and I'm going to figure out where I want to avoid the fines, I make sure Massachusetts gets the work done.
What kinds of fines do they get there, do you know? What do we...
Their fines are up to $20 million.
Wow.
It's actually up to 2.5% of their transmission distribution revenues. So they're significant.
Right. Now, the top state utility regulator has already said, once this is all done, we're going to look at staffing and we're going to reevaluate. I mean, if he were to do that, if they were to do that and to make changes, would that be sufficient, or...?
Well, I think we need to make sure we have an audit of what's going on. Cities and towns throughout the state are just not getting the work done. My town, we're about 60% without power. 60%, that's about 40,000 people without power as of Thursday night. That's terrible. And you heard from West Hartford and Simsbury, they're without power as well. It's just not getting the work done. We need to make sure that the crews are coming in. We heard from a gentleman from CL&P that says when we get crews from other states, they have to finish the work in their other states before they come here. That means we're waiting for them to get their jobs done before they even start here in Connecticut. Not only that, when they come here, they have to find housing for the people. He said that a number of their crews have to drive to Rhode Island in order to have housing. So they have to drive to and from Rhode Island just to work here in Connecticut. And I don't think we have enough workers right here in Connecticut to do the work.
Right. You know, CL&P, though, has been saying two things. They've been saying state regulators, the governor even said, state regulators are the ones who approve the staffing levels for CL&P. And then the CL&P guy said the other day, he said, you know, we present our tree trimming budgets to the state regulatory board, and we always get pushback. We want to do tree trimming, and we don't get approved for it.
I would disagree with that, because in the last rate case, what we did is we actually gave them more money for tree trimming, not less money. We gave them more than what they asked for. And what we need to think about is, and Chris had started talking about that we need to do an independent audit of their performance after the storm by a nationally recognized company who has expertise in this area, because to do that kind of assessment, it takes a great deal of time. And you want to look at their pre-storm planning, because I really believe that that's where they didn't do as good a job as they should. You want to look at how they did in terms of damage assessment, how they did in post-storm restoration, and you want to look at how they communicated with individual customers and how they communicated with state and local officials. The best way to do that is to have someone come in, do an analysis, and say, this is what we think should be done. They did that in New York in 2007. As House members, we have reviewed some of that material, and clearly they found that their utility had a number of areas where they were deficient, and I think that that's what we need to do as well here.
And I think the plan is, again, it's a simple idea. We know there's going to be storms in the future. Let's work out a plan that says 95% of the people have their service restored within 72 hours. Let's figure that out. Let's determine it. We'll work with the utilities and say, this is it. Okay, now that that's in place, you have to make sure it happens. And if you don't, there will be a penalty.
But what if they do that analysis and they say, okay, well, here's our new emergency plan. This is how we're going to get 95% of people back up within 72 hours. And in order to achieve that, we're going to have to raise our rates.
You will not have to raise your rates in order to do that in terms of the fine. They may have to raise rates if they increase staffing, but I would suggest to you that if you talk to Mary or you talk to anyone in the state, if it was for a just and reasonable cause, in other words, to have more staff here in storms so people will not suffer as they did in this storm, they would be able to accept a small rate increase. Obviously, we don't want something that's going to be a burden on people, but I think that can be determined by the State Public Utility Regulatory Authority, and it should be reasonable.
Well, I think, first of all, we need to look at the rates. We have the highest rates in the continental United States of America, the highest rates in the continental United States of America. Yet Massachusetts is able to do twice as good as we in providing service. So I think if we're looking at rates, we have to say maybe we should get a rebate from what we pay right now.
Well, and I think people will say with those rates, even if they come up with a new plan, that they ought to be able to do it without the rate increase. And I don't think people will be as amenable to any increase, even if it's small increase.
I think right now we should get a rebate based on the performance of what happened this last week.
And I would agree. And they actually did that in New York, by the way. They did get a rebate. So after all was said and done, that's what they did. They had fines, and the fines went back to the customers. So that may be possible as well.
One thing that we hear a lot from viewers and from people who are writing it on the web is the question of why are we not systematically starting to bury all of our power lines? Do we know the answer to that?
The answer to that is it would be billions of dollars. We can do it for new construction. It's much less expensive if you're building a house to bury the power lines. But if you had to take all the overhead lines and try to bury them, it would be billions of dollars and would, at a very conservative estimate, double our rates.
So it won't be done?
I don't believe it will be done because the cost is too prohibitive.
But there are alternatives as well. Last weekend I was with a woman who lives in Canton. She has a solar home. Right. And she said, I have a solar home, I have solar panels, I have solar heating. The sun came out today, I'm doing fine. So we need to look at alternatives as well. So I think we need to have as we're working on a general energy policy, we need to look at burying the wires. We need to look at alternatives. And we need to make sure that when the ratepayers pay for service, they get service.
What has been the cost? You know, you were here recently talking about Connecticut's efforts to increase jobs and to attract businesses. What has been the cost, do you think, of having these many days without power to businesses? And do you think there could be a long-term impact in terms of businesses looking at Connecticut saying, I don't know, that's a mess. Look what happens when they have a storm. I'm not going to relocate there.
Well, there's a couple things. One is, directly, it appears we don't have enough workers in Connecticut to deal with emergencies. Mm-hmm. So if they hired a few more workers, we don't have to drive to and from Rhode Island. They'll be at home, and they could work here and contribute to our economy. Also, in my town, I'm hearing from businesses right now. I know a woman, she owns a small business. She's not open. It's her only source of income. She is losing money every day. It really impacts businesses tremendously.
Do you think it could have a long-term impact in terms of a business thinking, where should I locate?
I think right now it's the people who are businesses in Connecticut right now, they're suffering. We need to make sure they get the power right now. And we have to make sure this never happens again. That's why we're working on this legislation. Something
else that the Current was reporting, that it had a source that was talking about how the Department of Transportation's tree service program had been cut. I mean, is that accurate? And if so, would it be beefed back up?
You know, I don't know what the information there, but I know we need to be careful about trees along the highways, especially along like the Merritt Parkway, where there's a good number of trees to make sure safety comes first.
Of course, we're just a few days away from an election, and I should have asked both of my previous guests who are both up for re-election. Do you have concerns about polling places being open in advance of Tuesday?
Actually, we're not for re-election this year.
Yeah, no, neither of you, yeah.
But, there are concerns, and CLNP says everything will be operational by Sunday. we're holding him to that. And if that's the case, then elections should take place as planned.
Do you both have power, or?
I do not.
Do you have power?
I just got it last night.
That must have been rejoicing.
Yes, as a matter of fact, when you drive down the street and you see the lights on, it does give you a great warm feeling because it was quite cold in the house without the power. So, and you know, for those people who have sewers and septic systems like I do in many of our areas of Connecticut, you not only not have power, but you don't have water and you don't have toilet facilities. So it's really a burden on people.
I hear from people in my town. I mean, I don't have power, but you know, I'm staying at a friend's house. But people don't have that option, and they're looking for, they're concerned. They have pets, they have kids, they have seniors in the house. It's a real burden. We need to do something about it.
We heard Mayor Slifka quite aggressively say he wants you all to hold CMP to task and to really go after them. What do you think? I mean, aside from this legislation, how big of an issue do you think this will be?
Well, I think right now they've lost the confidence of the public.
Yeah. Sure.
First, Irene was a blow, and then following, you think they learned the lessons from Irene. So right now, they're in a crisis of confidence with the public. The public needs utilities. They need electricity, they need heat, and they want to have a reliable source. So this is very important, and we need to act swiftly to make sure the confidence is restored to the general public.
Right, absolutely. We appreciate you guys taking time. I'm glad you got your power back. We hope you get it back by the time this airs. And we appreciate your time and your efforts.
Thanks.
I'm looking forward to everyone getting their power back.
Absolutely, absolutely. Thank you both for being here.
Thank you.
Well, don't forget, if you missed something here on The Real Story, you can now watch it online by going to ctnow.com. You can also catch us on YouTube. And please follow me on Twitter @Lori Perez. That does it for this week's special storm edition of The Real Story. I'm Lori Perez. We'll see you here again next week.